I can't be the only one that thinks healing potions are super uninteresting and dislikes them, right? Hello, my name's Peter. I'm the creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and in today's video we are going to be discussing consumables, how they're used in tabletop role-playing games, how they could maybe be done a little better, and I want to talk about the solutions we had for Tales from Elsewhere, and specifically the Clockworld setting. Alright, let's dive in, let's see what we got. Healing consumables in most games, the red potion, I think are uninteresting both mechanically and narratively. So let's talk about why I think that. This will be shocking to hear that the guy that dislikes attrition-based combat and hit points also dislikes how, mechanically speaking, a healing potion simply restores some of those hit points to continue on with attrition-based combat. I know, this is terribly shocking. So let's say a skeleton swings its sword at a player and it does 6 points of damage. On the player's turn, they use some of their action economy to chug a healing potion and restore 6 hit points. Hooray! What an exciting sequence of events that have happened in this fight. Really, nothing has happened. We've reset back to the way we were before that skeleton swung its sword. This is just not mechanically interesting. It doesn't move the fight forward in any way, it just prolongs it. And as you all know, I don't like when fights are artificially prolonged. So that problem is exacerbated when you have a combat engine that is already fairly sloggy, like Dungeons & Dragons can be. So you're really just layering problems on top of problems here when the healing potion is just erasing a few meaningless points of hit points. Or, as is often the case, you just give the healing potion to the player that's at 0 hit points to pop them up with a nominal amount of HP, just for them to drop again, so on and so forth, like we talk about in my crunchy combat and attrition-based videos. But even that aside, because ingesting a healing potion or feeding it to somebody else takes some of your action economy on your turn, it's also fairly uninteresting. In D&D 5e, it takes your action. In 5.5, they change it to bonus action, which is definitely much better. But for character classes that have very dense uses of their bonus action, it's still not fun to give up your flurry of blows or extra attacks or your cunning action to quaff a healing potion just to restore some hit points. Doesn't feel good. You've not gained much in that situation, except, like I said, kind of prolong things. To put it more succinctly, to make quaffing a healing consumable mechanically interesting, you have to make what it is restoring also mechanically interesting. And oftentimes hit points aren't that. So I also find healing potions and most healing consumables to be narratively uninteresting. So it's just a red potion contained in a glass vial that you drink and magically your hit points go away, and this is oftentimes my problem with a lot of magical healing. But healing potions in particular are just so inundated in this genre, both tabletop and video games, that they're just not interesting at this point. They're all just, your Estus flask or your heart consumable that restores some hit points, and that's not all that interesting. What even is that? It just feels like it's a mechanical bookkeeping that doesn't really have a connection anymore to the world you're playing in. So I played in a D&D 5e conversion of Conan the Barbarian's world, Hyboria, and it was a lot of fun. And the change in that setting, that's just a tiny change to their healing consumables, is they aren't healing potions, they're healing wines. And for those who have read Robert E. Howard's books, Conan is always quaffing big jugs of wine or, a leather sack full of wine that he downs, and calling them these healing wines was just more evocative, and it's a tiny change that made it more immersive, just for that one little renaming. I'm playing in a D&D 5.5 Dark Sun game right now, and in that, we don't have healing potions, we have healing fruits. Because fruit is so rare in this apocalyptic fantasy world that when you eat these little magical healing fruits, you recover some hit points. And again, it's just a little detail that helps a lot when these just bottles of red fluid are no longer causing any evocation. So let's now segue into talking about what we did for Tales from Elsewhere, and in specifically the Clockworld setting, to make these restorative consumables a little bit more interesting. So before I dig into this though, a word of warning. The remedies of the late 19th century are all very bad for you. Do not actually do any of this in real life, it should go without saying, because we're about to talk about some seriously funny stuff that they did to make you feel better toward the end of the 19th century. So, asterisks, don't do any of this. This is all make-believe. Okay, let's go. So to make the restorative consumables more interesting, we made them the kinds of things you would find in a late 19th century apothecary. So instead of downing a healing potion, you might take swigs from a flask of whiskey, or a few drops of laudanum from a little vial stopper, right? Or some chewing tobacco, or a cigarette that you rolled, or the extracts from various plants and flowers, all stuff that they used to prescribe all the time. These are your healing consumables. So when things get dire and you're under a lot of pressure, you can pull out your hip flask and take several swigs of whiskey, and that's how you restore things. So it's immediately evocative and kind of hilarious to see in the game. So hilarious flavor aside, we've actually added some very specific mechanics to these consumables. Now, if you're not familiar with how the injury system works in this game, definitely go check out the video. We'll link it down below and maybe pop it up here on the YouTube. But check that out first. It explains what we're going for with the injury system. So none of these consumables actually will remove injuries from the character. Instead, all they do is help restore your strain, sort of the little nicks and cuts and exhaustion that you gather. So in order to make sure that those injuries stay evocative and stay meaningful, you can't just make them go away with a single swig of a potion. So for example, the flask of whiskey, you can take several drinks at once, each one restores one strain. But a character can only handle so much alcohol before they start getting sick and drunk, so there is a built-in limitation on how much of this you can use before you have a rest. Otherwise you'll be having a bad time. So the other mechanical decision we made was to make it so consumables give you a temporary boost after you've consumed them. This is because downing a consumable costs one action, and you only have 2 of those on your turn, so it is fairly costly to do this. So for example, if you take a swig of your flask, you are emboldened until the end of your next turn. This makes it so you high roll all skill tests, and your grit defense goes up by 1. It's a little bit of liquid courage that gives you that boost until the end of your next turn. So yeah, you've sacrificed one of your actions here, but you've gained a fairly substantive combat relevant boost for a couple turns that is also fairly flavorful. If your character's feeling overwhelmed, they're all strained and they're afraid, they can take a swig of whiskey and feel like they haven't lost out on being able to do interesting things because this boost more than compensates for the single action that they spent. Similarly, having some chewing tobacco or a rolled cigarette will make you focused until the end of your next turn, in addition to removing some strain. And this makes it so it's harder for you to be distracted until the end of your next turn. Again, compensating you for spending that action in order to recover some of your strain, but giving you a relevant boost later on. Now, it starts getting pretty cool when you consider that some edges, these special abilities you can choose for your character, interact with these buffs, like being invigorated or emboldened or focused. There might be edges that give you and your allies a boost as long as you are emboldened. So you can activate this by taking a shot of whiskey mid-fight, which just oozes flavor for a Weird West setting. Now, I'm not so sure actually how to apply some of these Tales from Elsewhere structures and what I've learned there back into games like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, but I wanted to ask the community, have you encountered any role-playing games that have made the healing consumables or restorative items actually interesting from both a thematic and mechanical standpoint? If you have, let me know down below. I can't think of any as I'm recording this video, so definitely let me know. Comment below, and join the TFE Discord and let's discuss it, as I think we could learn a lot from some of these harder to find games, ones that I may have not encountered before, and maybe we could apply those lessons back into more traditional structures. So as always, thanks for watching this video. If you haven't liked and subscribed, definitely do so, and if you want to support the channel, please click the link down to our Patreon and consider joining and helping support the creatives who help make all of this possible. Thank you again, hope to see you next time.